Hey everyone, welcome back to the Athlete Climate Academy. I'm Hugh James, and today I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Julian Lings, who's responsible for sustainability at the North Face and based in Europe. Julian, welcome to the pod.
Hey Hugh, how you going?
Yeah, good, thanks, man. This is something I've wanted to chat about with you for a while because North Face are a massive brand in the industry, and obviously can steer the ships where it needs to go. And you've ended up working in sustainability at the North Face. How did you end up working your way up to this point as being responsible for sustainability at TNF?
Yeah, I think probably my generation, it was kind of a time when not so people were sort of directly studying sustainability. It was a bit more embryonic. My way into it was more through family and having some really kind of formative experiences. My brother is an environmental officer, and he was based in Portugal for a couple of years, and I was just kind of transitioning out of school and heading to university to actually do international relations. And I went out there for a couple of summers to help them out doing conservation work down on the last saltwater marshland down in the Algarve. And it was something I knew nothing about, and was really interesting, really humbling to go down there and work in this reserve, because it's one of the points where migrating birds stop on their way, on their journey from Africa. So you get all sorts of incredible wildlife, people coming down there to watch. And it was just amazing being that close to nature, but then also humbling because you realize that the whole of the southern Algarve used to be full of saltwater marshlands, but they've all been drained other than this one last marshland. And while I was there, actually, there was an aggressive buyout of the marshland by a business tycoon who wanted to drain it for farmland. And it was a huge case. It ended up going all the way to the courts in Europe. And the charity that was conserving the land actually won and managed to protect that incredible reserve. And being close to the organization, Arosha, who's managing that land, it was a real eye-opener, one, to just the beauty of nature, but also to the vulnerability of it. And that, for me, was a hugely formative experience. I've always grown up around the outdoors, predominantly in the Peak District, here where my parents live, but also in Snowdonia, where they had a little place. It's always been something which has been very powerful and valuable to me, and shaped my life, shaped my choices. And it was the reason why I came into the industry. I ended up really focusing in on sustainability as my career. Came to North Face in 2015 after spending a few years learning around how to do sustainability in the corporate world, in the food industry. And then came to North Face as a brand I'd always held in very high regard. And have been working now on the sustainability strategy and program delivery here at the brand for 7 years.
Wow. And that marshland you talked about, is that still there to this day?
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
It still can be visited. The bird life you can see there is incredible. It really did open my eyes just to the beauty of nature, but also that fragility to it. And understanding this is the last one. This is the last the last saltwater marshland, because the rest of them have been drained for golf courses and hotel complexes. And you see the stark contrast of what is lost when it isn't there, and how much is needed to make sure it's protected. That's not a given. I think really it's very easy to assume there is strong protection around these things, but actually that's something that needs to be fought for, to make sure that those places are there for future generations.
And that is, that fighting for the planet and fighting for the marshlands and fighting for sustainability. Like, it seems like you had the perfect formation of growing up in the outdoors, but also having these really formative experiences early on for you to fight sustainability. And then you come to arguably the largest brand in the outdoor industry world, and you want to bring that back in 2015, what's that, 7 years ago, to the North Face. So what was sustainability like at the North Face back then, that CSR, corporate social responsibility, and how has it changed in the last 7 years? What does it mean, sustainability at TNF at the moment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I always had a sort of intrinsic sense that sustainability was important for the North Face. And being in the brand and really learning about it, I really got into the heritage of the brand. The brand was started by Doug Tompkins. Doug and his wife would go on to become some of the world's greatest conservationists, buying up huge swathes of Patagonia and turn them into national parks. And the history of the North Face is littered with lots of powerful examples around advocacy, both environmental advocacy first and foremost, but also then on the social advocacy side. And the brand has always done some big, important things. Couple of examples. Back in the 1980s, set up a Conservation Alliance in partnership with Patagonia and TLT and REI. Conservation Alliance now is one of the largest conservation organizations in the world. And so the brand has these big things it has done. What I would say, though, and how it's evolved in my time here, working on that program along with the rest of the team, it's become more strategically embedded. We always did big things and important things like setting up the responsible down standard and gifting that to the industry, for example. But what we've really tried to do is zero in on where our biggest impacts are and work that into a strategy and goals to really address those. So I feel like the program has evolved and we've transitioned away from responsibility, like corporate social responsibility, where we recognize more impacts, towards sustainability, where we're trying to create systems which can be sustained. And now we're beginning to shift more towards that, towards regeneration. How do we start to give back to the world more than we take? And that's a really, really exciting place to be. And I'm full of optimism at the moment. I know we're in this decisive decade where the stakes couldn't be higher, but I'm really proud of where the brand is trying to go and what it is standing for.
I imagine as well that it's not easy to get a brand the size of TNF to shift course. I kind of think that, I'm from Wales. It's a lovely little country, and we were just talking before this about like the progressive actions that Wales is starting to do. And at COP26 last year, there was a great meeting between our First Minister, First Minister of Scotland and Iceland. And, I really believe that small countries are going to be the game changers when it comes to the climate change going forward. We just we can move quicker and adapt quicker. But then, I think outdoor brands that are small can probably do that as well. But then you've got the United States and you've got China, these massive countries that just by sheer scale, like, are just going to find it harder to adapt. And I imagine that's the same at the North Face, that just trying to steer that ship towards sustainability must just be really tough.
Yes and no. Yeah, the business does grow it's a big business, growing all the time. It's come a long, long way, particularly in the last 25 years. It's a multi-billion dollar brand now. So yes, it is big. And when we implement changes, there's a lot to be considered to create those changes. However, when we can do it at scale, I think we can do something very special. And we have been able to do certain things very quickly. So, for instance, we know that some of our biggest impacts come from our materials. And being a performance outerwear brand, a lot of that is synthetic materials. And in the last 7 years, we've transitioned away from using virgin synthetics to using recycled synthetics. And as of the coming season, over 90% of all of our polyester and nylon is now recycled. That's really shifting the scale. And we're making similar seismic shifts on things like cotton and working with our suppliers to reduce their impacts. So I think it does take time, but we are really gaining strong momentum on key areas where we know we have to make change to address our biggest impacts.
I suppose it's always seeing those those barriers as actual opportunities. If you are a bit as big as the North Face, then the opportunity there is to change a big part of the industry in one big swath. Is there anything then that kind of like will trickle down to the rest of the industry? Like, you're working with manufacturers of certain materials. I imagine if I started my own company and wanted to go to Gore or someone to Pertex to make a certain material the way I wanted, they would not be as welcoming as if the North Face go to them and say, right, we want to do this.
Yeah, we are lucky through the virtues of our scale that in some relationships with suppliers, we do have a strong voice. And we are looking at ways to leverage. We have a goal to halve the emissions of our key suppliers. So in our tier 1 and tier 2, so the manufacturers and the fabric makers. And yeah, we can bring that voice to bear. And it's no secret that we share a lot of suppliers with other brands in the industry. So there will be some shared benefit. And we also are trying to collaborate where it's right to collaborate in that pre-competitive space, so that where possible we can leverage our leverage is a better word, to channel our efforts across the different brands. And that's something we've tried to do both over the OIA. So here the OG is trying to figure out where there's good opportunities to collaborate in that space where we have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and what are the kind of things? Can you give any, like, not top secret examples of the things that you might be doing in the future to change the way that TNF look at the outdoor industry and the materials that you use and the fabrics that you use? We're always, and I always say on these podcasts and all training that we do, that we all have an impact on the planet. Like, every manufacturer is going to have an impact on the planet. A lot of outdoor industry started to take things like eco-friendly out of the wording and that kind of stuff, because we're just trying to have less of an impact than we did before. So is there any kind of big projects that TNF have coming up that, like I said, are not top secret, that are starting to lessen that impact on the planet?
Yeah. There's a couple of things I'm really, really excited by. The first one is, and we touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of the change in the narrative between sustainability and regeneration or restoration, depending how you want to term it. We are looking, and I wish we have been looking at it for a couple of years, and looking at how we can come to market with materials which are regenerative, i.e. they give back more than they take from the environment. And in spring 23, we will start to come to market with regenerative cotton. So cotton is a very intensively farmed crop, and that has really big challenges for the ecosystem services that soil can provide. As you know, like, soil is an amazing carbon store. It's an incredible ecosystem which plays such an important role in so many different ways, like biodiversity, carbon sequestration. But the way that agriculture works in industrial level, we are losing the health of the soil, and also then losing the carbon sequestration quality of it. So what we have been working on is to try and shift away from that industrial agricultural approach to cotton production to a regenerative agricultural approach. So what a lot of that is about is actually embracing techniques which have been around for generations, such as sequential grazing of cattle, for instance, or putting compost on rangelands. And what we are excited about, we could seem to see now through the measurement and the monitoring, is that by doing that, we can improve soil health and also help sequester carbon into the ground. And what regenerative agriculture holds out as a very tantalizing possibility, so that we're working super hard on, is getting to a point where we can sequester more carbon from the air than is used by producing that cotton. So we're actually working there in the space of hang on. Rather than producing something which does less harm for the environment? Could this be something that actually gives back more than it takes? And that is super exciting. We get into a very, very interesting space. We were a bit of a first mover in this area, and we did a very small pilot around regenerative agriculture in wool. We did that back in 2018, 19 with we called it at the time the Cali wool beanie, which was we called it a climate beneficial wool beanie, which was a very, very small pilot in the US, which went down super well and kind of started set off the light bulbs in our minds about what's possible in this space. And I'm really excited to see the energy around regenerative agriculture right now across lots of different commodities, whether it be cotton, whether it be leather, whether it be rubber. That's going to be, I believe, the next frontier in sustainability, is moving more into that space. And it's exciting because it really helps change the paradigm. And it also opens up different relationships and different types of collaborations that we need to have. Traditionally, in the textile industry, most of the relationships that brands have and our sourcing departments is with our tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. Whereas to do something like regenerative agriculture, you're not just talking to the garment manufacturer and the fabric mill. You're going right down to the farm level. And that's creating new relationships and creating new learnings and bringing us into situations where, hey, we might need to collaborate with the food industry, for instance, or there's just different dynamics. And that, I think, is so important because so many of the challenges that we face are going to require more collaboration. No one actor can do this on their own. And that need for collaboration has never been more pressing. And things like regenerative agriculture are taking us in the direction where we're embracing more collaboration. I think that's a really good thing. The second thing I'm super excited about is circularity and the launch of circular design product. So that's something we bring to market in fall 22 with our first circular designed collection. We've already designed with certain aspects of circularity in mind. So, example, designing for durability. One of the parts of circular design is making sure that product is used for its full lifespan, make sure that lifespan's a long one. And we've always designed with durability, and we've always had warranty and repair services. What we hadn't done before was designed not just with that in mind, but what happens to that product at the end of its life once it truly can't be used anymore? How do we create that circular system to bring that material back to become another product? And that's something that has been quite challenging, I think, for the industry, because a lot of our products are quite complex. And it's been a good challenge for our design department to think about that complexity and figure out how do we integrate a circular design so that we have all those good things around durability. But at the end of the life of the product, it's designed in such a way that it can be recycled back into raw material. So that's the second thing I'm pretty excited about.
I mean, both of those, you've got an easy audience with me when you're trying to get people excited about soil. I'm a big lover of soil, and the idea of the circular economy afterwards. I think that's one of the biggest and most complex things we need to tackle within the industry. Is how do we go about getting these all this really valuable material and fabrics back into the industry? And I think it's going to take us a while longer to get there. Like you say, there's such complex materials, the fabrics that we need to make stuff out of, because it still has to perform well, right? You can't say at the North Face or any other outdoor brand, well, we'll switch it out for this, which has a lesser impact, but won't perform as well. You can maybe do that with a t-shirt you buy on the high street, but when it needs to perform, you have to push that. So, the idea of that, is that going to start? Are there many talks within the rest of the industry with that? You're all working together, or is that something North Face works on by itself and then spreads that information or keeps that information to itself?
Yeah, it is something that we're doing a lot of work at the moment to share our learnings across the other brands within the VF Corporation, which is the parent company of the North Face, to make sure that there's other opportunities for it to be scaled. I do think there are opportunities to share on this more broadly with industry partners, and that's something that is coming up. And we're seeing some frameworks being shared, and you're seeing more toolkits being developed around circular design. It does require a lot of education, I think, to really embed circular design as one specific aspect of circularity in general. And we did a lot of work in the last couple of years to provide training for our design team, materials team, development team, merchandising, marketing around what is this? What is circularity? What is circular design? Because to your point earlier, it is a system, and it is a huge shift. And understanding all the dynamics, it is complex. And I think it's really, really important that we continue doing that training, not just within our own brand, but more broadly to help the industry understand what the implications of circularity are and how do we best strive towards it. Because some parts of circularity are really, really tough to embrace right now because the market doesn't value certain aspects of circularity particularly well. And that's where, I think as an industry, there's a huge opportunity to be a voice of advocacy. There is a wave of legislation coming around circularity. And I think we, as an industry, need to be a voice for progressive change because it will help speed up how quickly we can transition into certain parts of circularity, whether that be recovering materials from landfill or moving into re-commerce or rental. The financial or the economics of that at the moment are quite hard. And we do need government regulation, incentives, taxes. We need to align all of those levers in the right way to help us do it.
Well, you mentioned that the economics of it are quite hard, and it's mostly true that economics drive a lot of progression, drive a lot of where certain industries go. You know, the North Face is a for-profit company. You have shareholders. You have to make sure that they're happy at the end of the day. How does someone like TNF pass? You know, they have to make money for the shareholders, for everyone else. It has to be for profit and sustainability. Do they need to be separated out? Does being for profit hold you back in any way?
I don't think it's secret that, you know, being a publicly traded company comes with responsibilities, quarterly earnings, responsibilities to shareholders. That is the reality that we are in. And that one of the challenges I think the economic system we have right now creates for us. We've been very lucky as a brand that we have been able to start to reduce our impact even as we have grown. Probably not enough, and growing at the pace we grow at correlates directly with increasing impact. Where we must go is to start to decouple that growth from our impact. And moving into things like regenerative agriculture will be super, super important. Is that always easy? No, because we have margin targets like everybody else. And that challenges ourselves to think of creative ways to get around that. But that's not to say it can't be done. When we started transitioning away from using virgin polyester towards using recycled, you know, at the start it was quite a lot of concern, and not just inside the North Face, but more across the industry. How are we going to do this when the margin challenge it presents? But actually, it really made us think more creatively around how do we address that challenge in such a way that we can mitigate that margin impact. So I think as we move into areas like, for instance, bio-based synthetics, for instance, yes, there will be some challenges around margin, but as we focus on it more, we will use our innovations to try and address some of those challenges. But that's not to say there'll never be a tension. What I would also say is that our scale does allow us to do things it allows us to use our scale for good if we choose to do so. And I think that is a really, really big opportunity. Sometimes scale is seen as a negative, but if we can use it to drive things that we want, it can be very, very powerful. For instance, doing the RDS standard, for example, that's a standard that we took on a huge amount of legwork, partnering with Textile Exchange and Control Union to develop it. We could have held it for ourselves, but actually we realized if we're really serious about the issue of animal welfare, it's not really good enough if we just hold on to it ourselves. So we gifted it to Textile Exchange, and now to date, it's been adopted by over 70 brands around the world. It helps protect the welfare of 400 million birds every single year. So that isn't a good example of where scale can be really, really powerful. We should always be very conscious that scale can be the opposite way, but we shouldn't forget that scale can be used as a force for good.
And I suppose, I talk about politicians in this way, but I suppose companies as well see the winds of change. They know where the public mindset is on things. And like currently, the people who are buying stuff from the North Face and other outdoor brands, they want to see us pushing towards this. So if profits want to stay up, then us as consumers and as athletes pushing our sponsors' brands are asking for this, right? We're asking for more climate conscious solutions. We're asking for them to think about lessening the impact. Do your athletes at the North Face, your ambassadors, come back to you and say, this is the stuff that we want, or do you keep those things together, or are they separate?
Yeah, and we have a really good open dialogue with our athletes, who I think they're very conscious of their impacts, and they're actively looking for us to support them as how they can talk about it. And we've been this year putting all of our athlete team here in Europe, rolling out climate advocacy training to them to help them feel more comfortable with talking around the subject and being open about it. And I think there's a huge opportunity there to have a really open dialogue. But there are some challenges to wrestle with. And I think probably the principal one, and maybe here I see it on the athlete side, but I think in more general, there's a challenge around this, is around imperfect advocacy. And, you said it earlier, we all have an impact, but that's not to say that we can't have a voice. And I think there's a really important conversation to be had there to help understand that imperfection shouldn't be a barrier to having a voice on these critically important issues. And we're doing that training not only with the athletes, but we're also doing it with our internal teams at TNF to walk through that a little bit more. At a brand level, I think there is probably rightly a little bit of concern sometimes about being really vocal on climate change because of the backlash it might cause. And I think brands increasingly need to become more comfortable with that, when there's a work to do to make them feel comfortable of going out and being vocal on these subjects. It's a challenge at the moment because there's so much pressure and scrutiny around, for instance, greenwashing. I think the negative of that there's definitely some positives to that, because there are a lot of claims out there which are concerning and misleading. But I think what we should try and avoid is losing the amazing power that brands can be to force for positive change. So we shouldn't lose sight of that, as this narrative around greenwashing rightly does some important work. Hopefully we don't lose that on the way.
It's almost as if it's a really complicated field to navigate, right? Like, I always tell people that at the very minimum, if you don't want to have be in the conversation for climate and for sustainability, at least don't get in the way. At least don't interrupt those who do. And like you say, we rightly call out companies for certain types of greenwashing. It's really hard to know what companies are doing it and what aren't. But the ones who are trying to make steps, and the athletes who want to make change as well. We I come across this within the Athletic Climate Academy so much that people who want to make change and want to have that conversation are just shot down by trolls, and it's a really scary place to be, especially on the internet. So we're always pushing for good faith conversations where, just like in this podcast, we come in and say, we're not trying to point the finger in any direction, but also we won't put up with greenwashing or anything else. It's a really nuanced, complex conversation to have.
I totally agree. And it does need to be handled carefully. It's such a highly charged conversation as well. There's so much need for it to be handled in the right way and to create the right dialogues, because we need to bring such a huge group of people, such a huge force to create the kind of systemic change we need. These dialogues are super important because we need to bring more people on board, and that's through constructive dialogue for sure. That's not always easy, for sure.
And this is exactly that dialogue, right? So I appreciate you coming on. If they want to find out more about our listeners, about what the work TNF are doing in the areas of regeneration and sustainability, is there anything on the website? Where can they go to find that out?
Yeah, shoot on over to northface.com into the sustainability section in About Us. You can find a lot more information there. There's a lot of information which will hit in October, November when we go live, circularity with circular design product. And then you'll see more and more stuff popping up in the next few months with regenerative cotton coming to market as well. So a lot of cool stuff coming in the next few months, and a lot of good stuff coming after that as well.
And I'm really excited to follow that journey. Julian Lings, responsible for sustainability at the North Face. Thank you so much for coming on Athletic Climate Academy.
Thanks very much, Hugh. Cheers. Bye.